want to say hello, everyone, this evening. This evening, we got James Vance from Remote Falcon. He's going to tell us about all the good stuff and updates and everything he's done in the last year and help show us how to set it up, and we'll go from there. Thank you, James. We'll turn it over to you.
All right, sounds great. Let me get my screen sharing going here. All right, move that out of the way. Okay, is my screen showing for everybody?
Yes, it is.
All right, perfect. And I'm also going to kind of get the chat pulled up here. So if anybody has any questions, and you don't feel like unmuting, you can ask it in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on it here. Um, so yeah, so my name's James Vance. In 2020, I came up with the idea for Remote Falcon, and it started with just kind of a little project I did on my own show, where I did some unsafe port forwarding from my Falcon player to a web page where I allowed people to come up and actually start or restart the show, and then start allowing them to pick different songs. And I thought, well, this would be pretty neat to bring to other people. And so it started off as a pretty basic application, and once the community got a hold of it, it kind of turned into what it is today. Um, and so a lot of the features came about just from feedback from users. And so I, I did something different. I actually made notes on what to go through, because usually I just wing it. But I can't promise that I'll stick to the notes. I'm going to try to, usually it takes about 45, 50 minutes for me to go through the whole application. So my plan is to condense it down into kind of two different things. So the first thing I'm wanting to cover is for anybody that might be new to Remote Falcon, how to do the setup, like creating an account, setting up the Falcon player, plugin, getting sequences put in there, and what that looks like. And then I'll show some of the newer stuff that's in Remote Falcon that was done with this new UI. So in order to get to the web page, it's just remotefalcon.com. I've got it running on my local machine, so that's why you see a local host. But when you get there, it's just a standard home screen with a couple options to sign up and sign in. If you're new to Remote Falcon, even if you're not new to Remote Falcon, there's two things I recommend doing if you haven't. The first one is pulling up the doc. I need to update that documentation link. Shame on me. Pulling up the actual documentation for Remote Falcon. I tried to make it as fun and not boring as I could. And so this will also walk through how to sign up and how you sign in, and just different things like that, how to set up the plugin. And so it's got screenshots step by step. So I definitely recommend checking that out, because pretty much everything I'm going over tonight will be in here. And then also we have our Remote Falcon Facebook group. And so there's a link to it at the bottom of the homepage. But it's a great group with a lot of people and a lot of combined knowledge. And so if you have any questions, or any sort of requests or need help, then the Facebook group is a great place to do that. All right, and that was actually from my notes, because I usually forget to mention that. All right, so we'll start with signing up. So from the home page, you click the sign up, and it's 5 pretty simple things. Your first name, your last name, and then what your show name would be. And so this does have to be unique, so you can't use a show name that somebody else has. And whenever you sign up, which I'll show you in a moment, it will create your own website with that show name that you choose. And so this is going to be what you share with your viewers. So you want to make sure it's not something too tremendously long and complex, but also not anything that people aren't going to understand. And then email address, password, and you'll get an email at whatever email address you use to verify your account, just to make sure you are a person. And then once you do that, you are off to the races. And so once you verify your account, then you put in your email address and password, and you're in. So this is the first thing that shows up when you log into Remote Falcon. I am going to come back to this later because, like I mentioned, I want to cover how to set it up first. So you're coming into this as a new user and you just created an account. Like, what is it you need to do? So after you create your account, the first thing you'll want to do is go get the plugin for Falcon Player. If you don't use FPP, then there is a plugin for xLights as well. It's the Remote Falcon plugin, and it is part of the X schedule. And so I'm not going to cover the xLights portion of it here because I'm much more familiar with the Falcon part, and setting up the xLights plugin is super simple. The FPP plugin has a few more options that you can choose from, and so I tend to cover that a little bit more. So with your Falcon page pulled up, so I am running the latest version, so I'm running this in a Docker container because I try to keep up with the latest changes just to make sure everything works. So to install the plugin in Falcon Player, and I'm going to uninstall it here. You'll go to the plugins page, and everything's in alphabetical order. And so you'll scroll down until you see Remote Falcon, and then you'll click install. And it does its thing, and then you get a reboot prompt up here. So it's really important for you to reboot after installing the plugin, because I've had people with some issues in the past with certain configurations not saving because they forgot to reboot. Let's see here. So the way I reboot Docker is I just restart the container here. So we're going to refresh. So you can see that Remote Falcon has been installed, and the plugin will show up underneath Content Setup under Plugins on the bottom. And so we'll go to the Remote Falcon plugin page, and this is what it looks like. Now, when you first install the plugin, you won't have anything here, and you won't have anything in here because it'll be a fresh install. The only reason these are here because I had it installed before, and so it maintained my configuration. So if you do, something happens with your FPP or your plugin and you have to uninstall it for some reason, then when you reinstall it, your configuration, depending on what happened, should be there. So you'll notice the first thing that it asks for is your remote token. Well, what is the remote token? So this is, think of it as a code that tells Falcon Player which show it needs to interact with. So what your show is. Otherwise, Falcon Player doesn't know what Remote Falcon is. And so you have to have a way to link the two. And to find your remote token, you will come over here to the profile section. I'm not really sure what it's called. I'll call it profile. And then under account settings. And then under account, you can see it says remote token and other things. And this here is a remote token. And so I hide it because it is kind of like a password. If somebody else was to get a hold of your remote, your token and plug it into their FPP or xSchedule plugin, then they could take control of your show. So you don't really want to share it. I have this one set to ABC 123. This is, like I said, this is my development environment, so I'm not too worried about anybody taking it. Added this yesterday. This came from a feature request from somebody. It was a great idea. Just to copy the remote token. And then you're going to drop it in this box here. And you'll see that a couple things show up. So remote token saved. Oh, Daryl, was that you? So it says remote token was saved. It's restarting the listener and then shows that the listener was restarted. I'll kind of go into a little bit more detail what the listener is. That way it's not too confusing. Now, the next step is when you first sign up. So I'm going to go to this page. I'm going to go to the sequences tab, and I have a lot of stuff in here. Obviously, when you first sign up and set everything up, this is going to be empty. You're not going to have anything here. So the next step is going to be to get something into Remote Falcon. And the way we do that is just by creating a playlist with everything that you want to put in Remote Falcon. And so generally that's just going to be everything that you want your viewers to be able to view or interact with. So you can see I have a playlist here called RF for Remote Falcon. And I have 5 sequences in here. So a couple of important things about this playlist that you use to sync with Remote Falcon. You do not want to use this in any schedules in Falcon Player because it can cause some weirdness if somebody makes a request from the same playlist that you have scheduled. And so the intent behind this playlist is only to get sequences from FPP into Remote Falcon. Another important thing, don't add any lead in or lead out items. So it's very basic, very straightforward. Just add your sequences or your media to the main playlist. You can also add commands. And so a command could be something like start playlist at a random item. And I won't go into really any details on what people use that for. Just wanted to call out. Well, so sometimes what users will do is they'll have a surprise me option. And when the viewer clicks that, then it starts it runs a command that picks a random item from a playlist. And so it's not a specific song that somebody's picking, it's just something random. All right, so we have our sequences in here. So I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to delete those 5 sequences that I have in here. And then after you save your playlist, you head back over to the plugin page and you select the playlist from the drop down. So when you select it, if you select it for the first time, it should automatically update. If it doesn't, then there's a resync button here. I already had RF chosen. And so because I clicked it again, it's not going to do anything. And so I'm going to click resync. And so you can see remote playlist was saved and it's restarting the Remote Falcon listener. And so if I head back over to my sequences page, then you can see they show up in here. All right, so now we have sequences in Remote Falcon, and we have sequences in our Falcon player that are ready to go. So when you sign up, you are given a, like I mentioned, a web page that has the same name as the show that you used to sign up. So my light show name is Loomis Light Show because I am a Harry Potter fan. And so when you click on this link, it pulls up the page for your light show. Now, I don't remember if when you first sign up, if you actually get a default page. If you click on that link and this is blank, then you'll want to go to this viewer page section. And so while we're here, I'll show a little bit about this page and what it does. So your light show page the viewers interact with can be fully customizable. And it's customized using just CSS and HTML. I know it looks like a lot. It can be, but there's a lot of comments and stuff in here that can help kind of let you know what needs to change, things you're looking for. And a lot of it is really, changing the title of your light show and changing some of the information on it. But if you do not have anything that shows up on this page here, then if you open this and click the new viewer page button, then it will prompt you to create a new viewer page. And so this is actually something new for this year. So in previous years, you could only have one viewer page at a time. And if you wanted to switch between Halloween and Christmas, you had to take your Halloween template and upload it, or take your Christmas template and upload it. But now we have the ability to create more than one viewer page. And so you'll put in your page here, and then you have a couple of, or a few options for your starting template. So this is what your page is going to look like. So we have the OG, which is what Rick Harris worked on. We have a couple from Tracy from her site, and then a Christmas template from Jason Toy. And now if you want to know what they look like before you pick one, you can see them under the viewer page templates. So as you can see, this is the OG one that I'm currently rocking over here. And then you can see the purple Halloween template. So if you want something for Halloween, here's a nice Christmas template. And then here's one a lot of people have seen with the on air and nice snowfall in the background here. And so once you create your page, it'll show up here, and this is where you can make your changes and your edits. And there are certain tags and stuff in here. I'm not going to get into that. That's all in the documentation. But all I'm going to say is be careful about what you edit, because it can cause things to stop working. And so that's why I added this validation down here. So let's say you forgot to close this div here. So you can see we get an error that says there's an unclosed element, and it shows us what line number. So you click the line number, it takes you here. You say, oh, okay. So I need to put my closing div there, and then validation is good. Once you're done making changes, save the page. If you have more than one page in here, then you can pull up other pages by clicking Manage Viewer Pages. And so you can see that currently this one is active. But let's say I wanted to edit my my on-air page. Then I can edit that. I can view a side preview of my changes, or I can view a full screen preview. So this is really the spot where you get to really be creative and make that viewer page your own. And if you have multiple pages and you want to pick a certain one, then under the settings, under viewer page, we have this active viewer page option. And you can see these are my three. So I'm actually going to change it to this guy. And so refresh the page. And so now you can see I've got my logo up here. And then I have my sequences that we synced with Remote Falcon. All right, so now we're ready to start clicking things and seeing if something plays. So over in Remote Falcon, I'm going to head over to the status page. And I'm going to make this a little bit easier to see. There we go. All right. So we want to listen to sequence 1. So let's click sequence 1. We get the message saying it's been added. All right. We're sitting there and nothing is happening. So before Remote Falcon, or before the plugin in Falcon Player will play anything, you have to have something playing in Falcon Player. And so I had this show playlist set aside here. It just has 2 sequences in it. And so this is to ensure that somebody doesn't just start playing something when your show is not actually running in the event that you have your sequences selectable. So we're going to hit repeat and we're going to start playing. And so it starts with sequence 5 here. So you can see our page updated with sequence 5. And our next selection is sequence number 1. We have 1 song in the queue. And so we're going to wait just a few seconds here while it counts down. And so we're at 3 seconds now. And so now you can see it has switched over to sequence 1, which is what we selected. That's playing now. And sequence 4 is up next. So sequence 4 isn't actually something that was requested, but that's what is up next in your current scheduled show. So this does show what's coming up next in your schedule. So that way viewers don't come in here and try to select sequence 4 because they see it's going to be next. But if I decide I want a sequence 3, then it would queue that up and sequence 4 wouldn't play. It would just keep going with requests until there's no requests left. All right. And that's really all there is to the setup portion of it. It's really simple to get this going. And so at the bare minimum, this is really all you need. Let's see. So John, can we use the old Remote Falcon templates with the new? Yeah, absolutely. So there's new templates to choose from when you create a viewer page, but all of the, like your existing pages should work without any issues. So there were no changes made to the pages themselves. Yeah, so good question. Are the pages mobile aware? So yes. Yes and no. It depends on how much, it depends on how you do your page, if that makes sense. I'm going to put this back in here. Organize here a little bit more. There we go. So because you have control over the actual CSS and HTML, if you do something that makes it not mobile responsive, then yeah, it's not going to look good on mobile. But for these pages, they are, the starting templates are mobile responsive. So if I say I want to see this for a medium-sized mobile phone, then you can see that it does resize, and it's responsive for different phone sizes. Yeah, good question. Let's see here. I'm gonna try to answer a couple more questions and then I'll move on. Can the page be embedded into my website, or can it be controlled via HTTP requests? Yep. Good question. Yes and yes to that one. You can embed it in your site if you use iframe. I know a couple of people who have done that. I think with mixed results. Some people just do a redirect from their site to their Remote Falcon site. But there is also, if you go to your profile under account settings, under account, there is this option to request API access. And so when you do this, you will be given, you'll be sent an email with a key and instructions on how to use the API kind of instructions on it. I do need to update some of the specs for the API, but you can integrate this with your own website if you know how to use, server side languages, and essentially integrate with an API. Yeah, so John, that question, firewall network considerations during setup. Nope, none of that should be needed. So that is a great segue into what is the Remote Falcon listener. So the listener is actually the script that runs in the background and reaches out to Remote Falcon to look for new requests. When you make a change to your plugin, that's why I was saying the listener was restarting. That's because when a configuration changes, then it needs to restart so it can pick that up. For example, if you change your remote playlist, then it's going to need to restart so that it can look into that new playlist for the sequences. So a couple of since we're in the plugin talk right now, a couple of the options inside the plugin. So interrupt schedule is useful for somebody who runs, let's say, static display, and they only want to show sequences when somebody requests it or votes on it. So what would happen is, let's say you have a 30-second long animation. That's just a static display for your lights, and you don't want to wait for that 30-second animation to finish before a user's request is played. Then you can choose to interrupt the schedule, meaning once they make a request or place a vote, it will immediately move to that request. So it pauses the current effect or current sequence, and when the request is done, it picks right back up where it left off. And so you'll want to, I say you want to be careful about using it because it is a jarring experience if you have a sequence going and it stops mid-sequence to play something else and then picks up where it leaves off. So, it's important to know what this is and when to use it. Andy, I'm going to actually get to your question in just a moment. So check plugin. So in the past, there's been a lot of, not a lot, but there's been some confusion around, my remote token isn't saving. Or when I go to sync my playlist, nothing's showing up in Remote Falcon. So I added this check plugin option here. And so when you run it, so it shows no issues are found with the plugin right now. I don't know if this will work. Yeah. So you can see I got rid of the remote token. And so now it's saying, hey, your remote token hasn't been put in. Or it might say you haven't synced a playlist with Remote Falcon. It'll also check, it will check for internet connection to see if your Falcon player actually has access to the internet, which if you downloaded the plugin, it should, but you never know. Sometimes things happen. Earlier, I mentioned about, show this real quick, about adding lead ins or lead outs. So if I added a sequence here to the lead in, so it'll give me a warning. Remote playlist shouldn't contain lead in or lead out items. Or let's say I have a schedule, make it active. Then this shows, playlist should not be part of any schedule. So if something's not working, it's just a kind of a nice little check to see if there's something that maybe you forgot you shouldn't do. And so I'm going to get rid of those items real quick. Check it again, everything's good. I'm not going to go deep into the advanced settings because, like I said, they are advanced. But there's, good description to what it does, and then there's also more details in the Remote Falcon documentation on what these do. Really, they shouldn't need to be changed unless you are. Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about my headset died. Can you believe that? I knew I should have charged it. All right. So if I'm good now, I'll keep going. I'm good, right? Okay, perfect.
You're good. Yes, we hear you fine. Yes.
All right. Sorry about that, guys. And then also we have restart stop listener. You shouldn't need to restart it for any reason. It'll do that automatically when you change something. If you're freaking out, if something's not working the way you think it should, you can stop it. And so if you stop it, it'll show it's not running. And when stopped, it will not pull in any requests. If you want to restart it again, you click restart and it'll bounce back up. All right, so there's a question. Does it allow someone to keep choosing the same sequence over and over? Sure. Yeah, they can do that if you don't prevent them from doing it. So that's a good lead into some of the settings. And really, I'll just cover the important ones. So viewer control, this essentially turns your show on and off. So right now it's on. If I turn it off, you can see that there's no sequences, but it displays this little message that says, the show runs from this time to that time. And then if I turn it back on, then after just a minute, then we get our sequences back. So in regards to that setting, there are commands that you can run from Falcon Player that change certain things in Remote Falcon. And so if we come down to the Falcon Player commands, then you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Remote Falcon commands. And 2 of those is the ability to turn viewer control on and turn viewer control off. So then let's say you have a schedule that starts at, I'm not going to say that, starts at 8 p.m. Then you can actually add another item that starts at, we'll say 7:59, and it's going to run a command to turn our viewer control on. So before our show starts, this will automatically come in, turn on viewer control so that people can start making requests. And then I'm going to set one for 11 p.m. That's going to go in and it's going to turn viewer control off. So it turns it on, runs your show, turns it back off at the end of the day. And so it's a nice way to automate the enablement and disablement of viewer control. Control mode, jukebox and voting. Not going to go into voting. It's exactly how it sounds. So you have a list, viewers vote on it. At the end of the sequence, whichever one's in the lead is the one that gets played. Viewer page, we already covered the active viewer page. viewer page title. So this is what shows up in your browser bar. And then this is the icon that shows up in the tab. And then we have this is new, a make it snow option. So if I turn this on and I go to my viewer page, I get snow. So snow is like this huge deal, I guess, with viewer pages. And so I thought I'd just make it easier to add it. If you don't want the snow, maybe it's Halloween, maybe you live in Florida, you can turn it off. Yep. And then we have some jukebox specific settings here. Queue depth is essentially the number of sequences that can be requested at one time. So I'm actually going to stop this. And let's say I only want at most 2 sequences queued up at a time. Then you can see on the page, it says requests are limited to 2 songs. So this is dynamic. So whatever you pick, whatever that value is what will show up here. And so let's say I select sequence 1. That went sequence number 2, and then sequence number 3. So we have 3 sequences in there. So if I try to request one more, I get queue full. So it says the maximum that could be in there is 3. So one has to be moved out before it'll play the rest. If anytime you want to see what's in the queue, there is this view queue button that shows the order and the sequences playing. You can delete one of them and it will remove it from the queue, or you can just remove all of them and it clears it out completely. Jukebox sequence request limit. So this is the answer to Andy's question. Does it allow someone to keep choosing the same sequence over and over? That is what this handles. So if you set the value to 0, then it will allow any sequence to be requested at any time. So I'm going to bump this back up to 5, and I'm going to pick sequence 1. And so you can see that is what's going to play next. And I'm going to select sequence 1 again. You see it let me. And I'm going to select sequence 1 again. And it's just going to keep putting it in there. And it is going to drive people nuts because nobody wants to hear the same song over and over. So we're going to delete those. And we're going to say, I do not want a sequence to be requested unless one different sequence has been put in the queue after it. And so I'll demonstrate that because I know this setting can be kind of confusing. So if I pick sequence 1, then it puts it in there. But if I try to select sequence 1 again, it's going to tell me, hey, man, that song's already been requested. We don't need to do this again. All right, cool. So I'll listen to sequence number 2. So it puts sequence 2 in the queue. Well, now there is one sequence separating sequence 1 and whatever gets requested next. There's one that's separating the sequence. And so if I select sequence 1, it will let me do it because it ensures that there is one sequence between requests, one unique. So if I was to set this to 2, and we're going to clear our queue here, then if I select sequence number 1 and then sequence number 2, and then try to select sequence 1 again, it's not going to let me because I need 2 unique sequences in there. All right, cool. So I'm going to pick number 3 and I want number 2. Nope, can't do it. But I can do number 1 because there's 2 sequences after that. So hopefully that kind of helps clear up a little bit how to prevent those duplicate requests or prevent them from happening. For the voting, you can prevent people from voting multiple times. So a lot of people turn this on because they don't want somebody mashing the same sequence over and over, running up votes. So this just ensures that if somebody votes, they can only do it once per round, a round being a sequence has played. And then you can also choose to reset the votes after each round. If this is off, votes, if there's 3 votes on Let It Go and 2 votes on Baby Shark, then when Let It Go plays, the 2 votes on Baby Shark will stay there unless you turn this on and it resets everything back to 0. And then interaction safeguards. So nothing new here. I still have the ability to add a PSA sequence, which might be something like turn off your headlights. You can select 1 or more sequences to put in there and how often they play. So this says after every 3 sequences, it's going to play this sequence 1. And then after the next 3, it's going to do sequence 3, and it's just going to rotate through each of those. Check viewer present, same things as always. We have GPS location and how far of a radius to check to make sure they're within that geolocation. And then also the ability to use a code. Won't go into those too much. Hide sequence after played is another good option for preventing duplicate requests. So if I set it to 1 and sequence 1 plays, then after sequence 1 is done, it'll actually hide it completely from the list until 1 more sequence plays, and then it'll put it back in there. If I set it to 2, then it'll hide it for 2 sequences before it gets put back into the rotation. And let's see. I'm going to look at my notes here. I think I covered most of it high level. The dashboard, I mean, it is what it is. It shows how many unique and total viewers you had, how many sequence requests you've gotten, and you can download stats. And then one more thing, actually. So this is also new, the work item tracker. It's kind of slow, but it does eventually show up. If you have an issue or a feature request, it goes in here. And so you click the new button, give it a title, put whether it's a bug or a feature, and then click save. It'll create a new one. And you can see that you can see who created it. You can add comments to it, whatnot. And so this is just a good way to keep track of stuff that people's asking for. And yeah, all right. I think I'm going to turn it over to questions. So I'm going to kind of look through. So I know there are commands to turn the service on and off. Is there a command that can be used in a sequence to turn the interrupt option on or off? There is. So it is Remote Falcon, turn interrupt schedule off and turn on. And this will restart the Remote Falcon listener in the plugin. And so when the command runs, it'll automatically restart it so that that setting gets picked up. Oh, can you talk about Remote Falcon security? I'm guessing all communication between FPP and RF server starts from the listener. Can RF server initiate communication with FPP? It is one way. So when you put your remote token into Falcon Player, the listener reaches out to Remote Falcon to bring in the next request. Remote Falcon knows nothing of Falcon Player or xSchedule. It does not know what those things are. It only knows a user made a request, so I'm going to put that request in the database, and then the plugin reaches out and grabs it. And so there's no, the only communication is from Falcon Player to Remote Falcon just via the API calls.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying thanks for the explanation on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I see somebody said, no wonder I couldn't find it in GitHub. Not sure what you were looking for, but
Issues.
oh yes, yeah. So that I'm going to that repo does the old Remote Falcon tracker does still exist, but it's not being. You could put an issue on there, but I'm probably not going to see it because I never come back here anymore. I liked the idea of adding it to Remote Falcon because then it didn't involve somebody to have to go out and create a GitHub account if they don't have it, just so that they could create an issue. And it just made it a little bit easier, while you're in the app. So try to keep people from having to leave Remote Falcon to go do something else. So if you find an issue, then you're already here and you can put it in there. Yeah. So I don't, does anybody else have any questions? If not, I will gladly fill the time with other stuff. Yeah, sure.
I ran Remote Falcon with xSchedule, and I noticed last year when a sequence would play and a request would come up, the current sequence would finish all but the last second, and then it would cut to Remote Falcon, play the request. When the request was done, it would go back to the playlist in xSchedule and finish that last second of the song, and then go to the next sequence. That just sounded kind of weird. Is that an xSchedule thing, or is that something that can be fixed by you?
Yeah. So actually, I'm just going to pop open xLights here real quick. That would be an xSchedule thing, because so similar to the plugin. So there's an option here that shows, I lost my spot. That shows like the request fetch time. And so this will go out 3 seconds before the end of the current playing sequence to get the next request. And xSchedule does a similar thing, but I don't know if you can modify. I guess you guys will get to see the Remote Falcon plugin. And so there are some options. So there's this time to grab next song. And I don't know if if changing that value would fix anything or not, but it would be something in the xSchedule Remote Falcon plugin itself. The unfortunate thing is I have not worked on this at all. So Keith Wesley was actually the one who wrote all of this stuff to integrate with Remote Falcon using xSchedule. And so that'd be a good question for me to ask him or the other xLights developers to see if it's something simple that might need to be fixed on it. But yeah, and that's also something that would be great for this. So let's show how to add a bug to the work item tracker. So we're going to say the xSchedule plugin stops 1 second for end of sequence, right? I'm understanding
Correct.
that, right?
Yep.
Cool. At the 1 second after request is done. So we'll say that's medium and we'll save it. And so now I know that I can, go out and remember to ask about that. Yeah, so that's a good thing to look into. I don't have a resolution for you, but we'll figure out what's going on. Oh, any way to search open or close? No. there's not much in here right now. I think if the list starts to build up, and these closed ones will start to fall off after a while. If it starts to fill up, then I'll probably add something like that. The ability to search like title or description to see if somebody's already requested something. But right now there's not a whole lot in there. Cool. So until another question comes in,
Question.
yeah, go for it.
So when you set up your sequences, right, you have the ability to point it to an image and add an image in your playlist. Is there a way to control the size of that image besides like cropping the image itself? Like, is there a way to do in the tags like a width and height?
So I think so. I have to admit I am not the best at CSS, and so for everybody else, what he's talking about is this sequence image URL. So if I wanted to, I'm gonna say all I want for. We're gonna go to images, and we're gonna pick this one, and we're gonna copy the image address. Oh wait, that's not gonna work, is it?
I'm pretty sure you can, Alex. It's all part of the template. You just put some HTML code in there with your width and height. You'll resize it.
No. But yeah, so if you want to add an image next to your sequence, you can do it here. As far as modifying it, there is
Maybe I missed it.
Somewhere in there's like a row where you actually code the row in the table.
Yeah, and there's so here's a sequence image class where you can set
there you go, width and height. Yep. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Now it's gonna apply to all images. Okay, so it's not going to
that's exactly what I want. Yeah, because I did the same thing you did, which is Google image search, and then they're all over the place.
Okay. Yeah. So this would apply to all images, and so there's not a way to do it for individual images unless you save it and actually go in and use like GIMP or Photoshop.
But this will make them all look nice and uniform.
Right.
Yeah. So. Okay.
Yeah. And so while I was on here on the sequence page, wanted to show. So we do have some called pills here that show whether or not your sequence is active or inactive. So these are all ones that I actually did for Christmas last year, but because I didn't sync them from FPP today, they all show inactive. The type, it'll either be sequence, media, a media being just an MP3 or a command. And so it'll show what type it is. And then you have the option to play, set the visibility, or delete it. So let's say we have sequence 1 and sequence 2 in the queues. So you can see the sequence 1 is next. If I decide I want to see sequence 5 and I hit this play button, so you can see it says it's queued next. So it will, kind of an admin override, if you will. It will queue that sequence up next ahead of everything else. And so if you have somebody who comes over and they're like, hey, I want to see this sequence, pull up your sequence page, hit the play button, and it'll show next. Visibility is helpful for things like PSAs. So you need to sync them with Remote Falcon, but you don't necessarily want anybody to see it. So you can turn the visibility off on a sequence and it'll hide it from the list. So we have a question. Do you recommend naming sequences with how they should show up in the RF playlist, or is there a way to use xLights metadata to make display names easier to manage? Yes. You can make your sequence file names the way you want it to show up in RF. You don't have to. You can change the way the sequence appears in Remote Falcon by changing the sequence display name. So we're gonna say I want this to look different. So the sequence is still sequence 1. That's still what it's going to be called in Falcon Player or xLights. But in your viewer page, it's going to appear like this. And so like you can see like my sequence names actually did match my display name. And that's what I did. So however I want it to look in Remote Falcon, I just name it that in Falcon Player. But I know in the past there's been issues with special characters. And so if something isn't syncing properly due to special characters, then you can always just make a simple sequence name in Falcon Player and then do your special characters in the display name. So you do have a couple options. Oh, something else while I'm on the sequence page, something that's actually taken out. I tried not to remove stuff from the previous version, but you notice you don't have the ability to drag and drop sequences anymore. I might add that back, but I don't know. So whatever order the sequences are in your playlist in Falcon Player is just the order it's going to show up in here. And so I didn't want, like, the drag and drop was nice. It was kind of messy. And so I didn't want to reinvent the wheel here. So I figured just maintain the ordering that's in here. So if you're getting frustrated because something's not dragging and dropping, that's why. Cool. So Alex said copied token and pasted. I see it. However, if I check plugin, it says it's not been entered and a remote playlist hasn't been. So did you reboot?
Yeah,
After
yeah,
installing the plugin?
Yeah, we saw this last night or 2 nights ago. We're helping somebody, and it's a problem. So I used a little copy, it's pasted. I have the remote list listed in there. And if I check check plugin, I get that error. If I get out of it and go back in, it just says remote token. It's not accepting it.
Okay, and or the person did fully reboot the Pi or the
both
Beagle?
did. Yeah, I just installed it on a different Pi too now, and I on a different FPP, and same thing happened.
Okay, well, I will have to look into that then. I've heard of that happening, which is
I'll
why
create a bug.
Yeah, there you go.
I had the same thing, but I rebooted the Pi and it worked. So I remember that was an issue before. Rebooting the Pi always seemed to work.
And that's why
I rebooted. My Pi's been up now 11 minutes.
What can I ask? What version? Falcon Player?
Of course, 7.
Of course, 7.
we only roll with the latest here.
You gotta have the new stuff. Okay, so I've been, like I said, I had this running in a Docker container. It is version 7, but it is also Docker. And so what I'll do is I'll fire up version 7 on my actual Pi and give it a whirl.
You want me to still create? I'll create a case too.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
That works for me. Because I guarantee I will forget. I'm good at forgetting.
James, you touched on it. I don't want to dive into it too much, but I created the ticket about the API not working. Do you think it needs to be updated? Is that your thinking?
Yeah. So
okay, I wasn't sure if you had a chance to look at it or not.
I haven't.
That's fine.
So the API,
does it can you test it out here? It wasn't working here for me. Now you'd have to have your authorized token. I don't know if you've got one handy.
I do, but I don't want to share it.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I mean,
I'll leave it to you. If you can just see if yours works, then maybe it's something on my end. It's not working.
Yeah, I was trying to remember if it works at all from the Swagger.
Like I did the
documentation.
authorize, and then I did the try it here, and I also did it from the GitHub repo, with those 3 files, the sample sequences, and it didn't work either. Got the 401 error, just the same thing as this one here, 401 error.
Okay.
So
all right, yeah,
not super critical. I was trying to get something to work, but
yeah, I'll take a look at it. I mean, I do have. I know I tested the API, but I haven't messed with it in a while. So I'll give it a once over, just make sure.
Can you talk about, like, maybe I'm missing something since you're here. Can you just expand one of these things, like the preferences, little drop down, whatever, scroll down, and scroll up a bit. Actually, right here it says the subdomain for your show.
Correct.
So that would be my show name, right? Like Heidelberg Lights.
Not quite. Well.
Oh, maybe that's what I'm mistaken.
But it would be like exactly how you would see it here. So all lowercase.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'm not mistaken. All right.
Yep. Yeah. And that's why I say the sub. I know. I figure if you're using the API, you probably know what a subdomain is. And so I
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's subdomain of the URL. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
You could have said your show name, but then some people have a show name with spaces in it and everything else.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so what happens is when I get the token, your authorization token.
Yep.
I take this and I make sure that the stuff you're requesting actually belongs to you.
Makes sense.
And that you're not passing in somebody else's light show name that your token shouldn't have access to that. So
for sure. Okay. I'll leave it for you. That's enough.
Yeah, I'll give it a once over and make sure. And I'll update this, or I'll find something to do with it to make it better. So
is that going back to that question? That's the subdomain, that the Remote Falcon subdomain.
Correct.
Right? So maybe change that UI and say Remote Falcon subdomain listing, just so people know what that really is that you're asking for.
Okay. Yeah,
you know
and it's
might make it a little clearer.
Does it show you anywhere in the new UI what your host name is called?
It's under your profile.
But see, that's got spaces in it. So is there a spot that shows you what it really is?
There isn't.
That's what I was curious. I was wanting to say again, you got your show name's got spaces in it, but there's no real. Oh wait, the one below. No, the Facebook one is you just typed it in.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really show you what your tag is, or how you would even know what your homepage is called.
Right. Yeah. You would have to go. You'd have to go here and actually look at it. So yeah, that's a good call out.
I think it used to in the old UI. Like how would a new user know what to put in to
Yeah, so
maybe it's an email or something. Does it come in the? Maybe it comes in the email. I don't
know. No, it's not part of the email. But I'm going to add. I'll find a place to put it.
Yeah, because it's not really obvious what a new user would type in to get to the Remote Falcon page for their viewer page, right?
Yep. Yeah, unless they go to the link and actually look at it. But yeah, that'd be super easy.
But they don't have the link yet. That's my point. I don't think they would have the link yet, right?
And maybe you may want to include that when they sign up, the name of that, you put that URL in the email so that, if they do this now and then next August, they go to set all this stuff back up and they forget what the URL was, they can go back and look at their email and get the URL.
Cool. And I'm going to test something else to see if I can actually update a work item here. Hey, look at that. Yeah, that's a great call out, because it did show it in the old UI on that header where it showed the show name and then it showed the URL underneath, and you actually clicked on the URL to get to it.
Yeah.
But cool. Well, I know we're a little bit over, but don't want to cut anybody off who still has questions.
I've got a question on the viewer page. Sure. If someone was slick enough with HTML, could they put a feedback form, let's say in the far left side of this thing, that would include their name and email and their thoughts on the show or something like that? And that would run independent of everything that Remote Falcon does, but it's just part of the viewer page.
Yeah, so that's a great question, because that allows me to mention something. If it doesn't use JavaScript, then yes. If it's anything that requires a script, or we'll just say anything other than CSS or HTML, then it won't work. And the reason why is because this code, like all this styling and the HTML, so Remote Falcon is written in React.js, and all of this stuff gets converted to React. And when it gets converted, it replaces things like these tags with the actual values, but it'll ignore anything JavaScript, because, I mean, it's not going to execute anything. But if you can figure out a way to do it without JavaScript, then yeah. Otherwise, you'd have to use the API or have something on your own website.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Absolutely. Oh no. Do you still have the web page showing you other people's web page that you can copy for your own? You're talking about the viewer page gallery. Yeah, I niched it. I don't know. I didn't like it, to be honest. It was 12 pages and 90% of it was the same. You know, there were some good templates on there, but I really wanted to get a little more of a handle on it. And so that's why I added kind of these starting templates, like the ability to create a page from a template. I do intend on adding something here where if somebody wants to provide their page as a starting template, then they can. But I just needed to be a little more hands-on on the template process, because when I looked through those viewer pages, it was a lot of, first of all, it was a lot of old templates from like the old Remote Falcon days. And then it was just, you would see the same page, but the only difference would be maybe a logo or some text. And it was just, it was a little too much. But yeah, that's where it went.
Well, James, I want to thank you. Looks like there's been a whole lot of changes since last year. And I'm sure a lot more people are going to enjoy it this year too. So,
all right.
Thank you very much. And if anybody has any questions on any of it, he does have a Facebook page. So you can always go in there and ask, and he's pretty responsive as far as getting answers back to you.
Yep, and if you don't have Facebook, then I don't know if I have anywhere. I don't even have my email address anywhere for people to contact me. I'll put that somewhere in here. I'll actually put it in the chat. But it's just jvance@remotefalcon.com. So if you wanted to send an email or something like that, then I check it pretty often. I'll be more than happy to help out. So, all right.
Thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.